Will Ferrell's Jim is a loving single father in You're Cordially Invited, but what happened to his wife? The Prime Video romantic comedy follows two characters, Jim and Margot Reese Witherspoon, as they try to throw weddings for the people most important to them. Of course, as often happens in romantic comedies, they wind up falling in love with one another among all the chaos. This was rather great news for Jim, who had been widowed for years and had never attempted to engage in a real relationship. Instead, Ferrell's You're Cordially Invited character focused entirely on his daughter. Right off the bat, in the 2025 comedy movie, it's evident that Jim is obsessed with being a good father. His house is covered in books on parenting, and he meticulously ensured that Jenny's visit would be perfect. All that was missing was the woman shown in many of Jim's photos around the house. There are pictures of her with Jenny when she was young, but Jim is the only parent shown in the more recent images. Jim later confirms that his wife had died years before and that he had remained single ever since. Instead, this You're Cordially Invited character placed all his attention on his daughter. Jim's wife died from cancer when their daughter Jenny was 6 years old. Jim reveals when he had to tell Jenny her mother died. Will Ferrell behind a tree in You're Cordially Invited? It's ultimately revealed in You're Cordially Invited that Jim's wife died of cancer when Jenny was only 6 years old. Near the end of the movie, when Jim and Jenny finally had their heart-to-heart, he described having to tell his daughter that her mother had died. It was among the more heartbreaking moments of the otherwise outrageous and comedic movie. Such an emotional scene and revelation is important to understand why Jim behaved the way he did and why it was so important to him that Jenny had a perfect wedding. How Jim and Jenny's relationship changed after his wife's death in You're Cordially Invited. Jim focused all his energy on Jenny. You're Cordially Invited 23. Ferrell's Jim said near the end of You're Cordially Invited that after he had told a 6-year-old Jenny that her mother had died, he became determined never to see her so heartbroken again. Her happiness became his obsession, so he no longer paid attention to his happiness. Jim and Jenny developed an extremely, almost uncomfortably, close relationship as a result. However, once Jenny grew up and headed out on her own, the burden of her father's happiness became a problem. She felt if she were anything but happy, Jim would fall apart. Jim's affection and attention toward Jenny saved them after his wife's death, but it was clear in You're Cordially Invited that it was way past time that he moved on. As it was, Witherspoon's Margot had a similar situation. She felt judged and ignored by her family, so she latched onto her sister. After their grandmother passed away, Neve was the only person Margot felt connected with. Like Jim, she had to learn to let go. Thankfully, they found precisely what they needed in one another. All those years after Jim lost his wife, he found a more appropriate replacement in You're Cordially Invited.